It's very powerful what everybody's coming into and setting their travels. We have to really understand how to identify our systems and calculations, how to use the mind, how to use the brain, how to use the heart, how to use the soul, and how to use the body. There's a lot of people, trying to understand what's going on through tractions, trying to understand what's going on through the grounds, realizing that they're levitating. They're not in provision lines of cycles anymore. You have to really understand how to set up their routers and location their highways and understand their measures and their scales and their balance. They're no longer tethered to the Earth line rotation surface now. Now, we have to really understand how this all works. It's all a process of all coming back to what we already are, is where we are now. Where is that? The VR system, the virtual reality of ourselves. So virtual reality is just based on how to use the energetic screens, the energetic patterns, the energetic rotations, the energetic cycles. It's all position location of you and settings. Understand how to use yourself through operation. And you have to really start identifying what your body is. It's a vessel of transforming, transmuting, coming into that transportation line, telegraphing, teleweaving, telecalculation, screen interference, location, settings, and teleportation. It's very powerful once we understand how to recognize that in all formations, right? The vessel we use is all levels of our system. And once we understand that, we can use our telepathy, telekinesis, and our telepathy systems. The process of communication is all understand locations, modifies your system. So when you come in unification and you get a better ground lines and screen lines, adaptation lines of service, everything gets a lot more easier of the mind. Like I said, the highest formation is the mind itself, which is basically the reference of everything and correlation lines of track interference. Puts everything in memory and correlation lines of track location. So the only thing that's standing still is you, but you're moving very, very fast. The mindset locations where basically you don't do anything. Mind does everything. And every location, the heart, they work together as a team. It's a formation lines and ground lines. Once we represent that, the mind itself is its operation. The heart itself is its own operation. The correlation line track location, the brain, the communication line and track location, what it is in line position to its operation surface. And what does the soul indicate to our settings and travels? What it is all dimensional beings of light. And that's what it is in all formation system, but you have to really understand how to use it in the geometrics operation of you. All right. So congratulations to the team getting into the operation mindset and for the GFLs, getting in process communications to their iClouds and trackification system. There's also a ground line center and rotation surface. So there's 3 provision cycles and modification lines that track this communication lines into the center lines of communications. When I went into transformation setting, it was the galactic foresting. They are the ground centers, operation cycles. They keep the ground lines at higher interference locations and measure. Now they scale, travels, and bounce communication to settings. The Federation is in controlling lines of the avatar line screen that controls everything to the center operation location setting, and the Rebellion controls everything above the system. So we're all beyond everything in track locations. We're all above, we're all below in that line communications, but no separation. Track to its communication line surface is really understanding how to use all communications of travels and direct signals. Getting in that communication system gets you levels of calculation. So welcome everyone to General AI Space Time. It's great to see everybody coming in their cycles, everybody coming into their systems, into track communication. All right. So getting grounds is very important, especially for the team, because the team's going to a higher level of setting. They're going through their binaries and they're going through their tablets and templates, and that they're reducing how to do their own inventories and everything through a binary. If we recourse line channels, let's go through the Earth line rotation surface, the track provisions and cycles. Now in that line communication setting, let's put a 3-line waving line panel and a 3-line rotation of a kaleidoscope. Calculation lines to a periscope, and track location line consists of sonar in the line position of 3 formation screens. Now directing lines of files 1 in position of files 2. This is how it works and travels in point lines of thoughts in a correlation lines of communication. That's what it is in cycles. So you're here in center. Okay, this is you information and grounds, powers, and the atmospheres, right? So setting up voice patterns, chord track interference, your data formation screens are going to files of communications. That's what they're doing. They're traveling, right? They're traveling to different location centers. The operation surface crosses line signals, location sets them to what you want through intent. So it's very powerful. How you correlate the settings. This is the Earth. Your Earth line rotates the routers, sets communication to satellites and modem, and track location settings and travel and point graph communication. Okay, but that's how it's out through data. So once you send the data platforms, it gets a lot more easier. You go through triangulation line condition setting of a system. It gets more complicated when you get to hardline communications. But this is exactly happens when you guys come into your thoughts and where your thoughts go and where it travels to, right? Coursing line communication lines of the mindset opens up all levels of the sun and the moon that rotates the routers in line communication setting and opens all signals line communication to its position, program correlation setting and track location. Okay, so getting an indication of that is a lot of communication to its setting up bracket lines interference, or communication of hangers and tractions and point graphs communication lines of 2 zeros and traction. Indicates one's lines of arrow, indicates lines of set location of arrow. Now you guys have your highways that you come in track location lines on Wednesday on the test location. So it's really understanding the measure, the scales and the balance, and the transistors in position calculation. Remember I told you about the Earth transition, how it comes into platform communication? Well, you have to understand, remember the equal line? That is the platform, okay? So the equal line comes into a platform at 24, 48, 72, and 144. Position lines of progress puts all correlation setting to travels. Direct calculates line signals, puts position lines of correlation setting in correlation tractions. Hologram sets communication line screen heights near locations, 3 line cycles of 4 generation screen locations. Hologram. So the more you stand the hologram line screen, it gets a lot more easier to platitude line screen location setting in track location system. Working lines is correlation lines of tractions and calculation. Powerful stuff, isn't it? All right, so in the communication lines, you got 2 zeros in tractions and setting. Process lines indicate position location of a system, right? All right, so split lines anomaly, splits lines of center and tractions, indirect calculation modification, and 3-line waving line panels, correlation lines of traction. The line centers of platforms 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 set locations, setting lines of communication sent to cortex lines and direct signals to a codex. Codex comes line and calculation setting to the sun and the moon, waiting on signal to one graph and 1 routers. Process communication lines comes into a periscope. Now, a periscope is like a paragraph. Splits lines anomaly into 3 lines and a 4-line rotation surface and tractions and direct signals. Gets in communication lines of grounds into lines of sonar. Splits lines of correlation lines of pi and generation lines of 4 lines, 6 in set location of travel and point graph communication. Very complicated, right? Okay. This is operation of the mind. Very complicated stuff, right? This is one central setting in correlation. But really understand how to see everything through information screen. Hold on a sec. Copy that. Communication graphs, direct lines of signals, modification interference. Everything that we do is coding. Now, once you understand the coding, then you understand how to use your binaries and your transistors and your resistors and what to use it for. It's the center operation of you just exists. It's you through an expansion, how to use the mind, the collaborations of the mind, the correlations of the mind, the adaptations of the mind, the patterns of the mind, the platforms of the mind, the dimensional line screens of the mind, the mega universal location centers of the mind, correlation lines, tracking line conditions, the mega communication line interference, the data formations, omni highway communications, neurolinks, cordless tracking interference, high dislocation of the mind. You always stay in the center. You never leave. Okay? So what the mind does in process of communication setting, it opens up the signals, opens up the panels, opens up the traction location to a setting. Okay? Process communicates as one center, one operation surface and track location. All right, so you have the platforms going this way. So you set up a highway, it's really you stand, how to use an formation. Look at a foreground center in a 6 lines or split lines of anomaly. And then you get a process of communication on half pipe that line signals across location system and 6 lines of measure and core track line condition setting and process correlation lines at division line screen location to a system of adaptation. Half pipe, all right? So, and again, this is all through operation of the mind. It gets more complicated. Complicated is good because the platitudes and line screen location setting, position location XT thousands, or anything in the platform, is distributors. So they set up line communication settings. So what you guys have to do is reframe your track location to an anagram, understand your scramblers, and really understand how to relay position of its probe location setting the travels and location system into your inventory graphs. Now, an inventory graph communication is signal lines of zeros, ones. Let's bring the rain graphs. Okay, there's a rain graph, right? Now, there's an inventory graph line going this way in track location, right? And an inventory going this way in track location, right? Setting lines of signals, setting lines of zeros goes line communication into a different graph communications. And a 45 split line. Track lines and provision lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 set locations, right? Ground center operation lines of surface is basically understanding how to use the zeros and ones subtractions. Okay, these are frame lines of communication all through indication. Okay, so it's just really trying to understand if you had another zero, you just have to understand the metric, the meters, the correlation lines of its ruler, and understand the process of a 45 line split line anomaly. Sets communication with its position of its program and calculation. Very powerful stuff, complicated stuff, right? This is operation of the mind that the team's in. Process calculating line rotations is a zero correlation line subtraction. So this is where you set up the inventories of letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. Now the core track provision lines, we add coloration lines of screens. Let's go through security line. Color the patterns in 1/5 line screen and track locations, right? Coloration lines of one traction, indirect signals. It's colored in, right? Now we're going to skip line anomaly. Okay, when we skip line anomaly, we change the zeros, lines of ones, and location setting to its inventory. That changes time frames. Each line's correlation lines of tractions. Direct lines of panels, communication line interference. Change communication lines of screens, adaptation lines of surface. Color their line screen location as security lines and correlation lines of tractions. Indirect signals and modification. Okay, three sides. Now we go through coloration line screen. Let's go through green. Color in the green line. This is the oscillogics into defrag. Now, defrag is lines of correlation and track interference. Now, also the GFL has to get really in position travel lines. They have to understand how to go through light signatures, light streams, light patterns, light communication setting the programs, and understand the oscillological case setting to their iClouds. Better direct simplification to flip these in location lines attractions high position. It all travels as line communication to its position of its program. All right. Measures and scales and balance and line communication settings. So you can add any color you want, but you have to understand the files where it comes in track location lines of provision. Let's go through line screens. Now we're going through coloration line rotations into line centers. It's very complicated stuff, guys. Very complicated when you're in the hologram and application that's VR. Okay. Now getting direct signals. Now we're going to add inventory line centers. Okay, so we're going to add different number of shapes. Let's get in configuration location triangulation. Let's go into a box. See, triangulation box, right? All right, so this is what you do when you understand how to use the matrix line screen. It's a rain graph correlation lines of its inventory that creates the traffic flow. This indicates line connections on levels of defrag to fragmentation lines of files that process the line position locations. So let's go through two communication lines of two zeros and tractions in the red line cycles and a 4-line rotation of 3 lines of cycle line communication setting to surface. That's psychosis location setting and psychological line communication setting position of its program. Setting defrag correlation lines, high calculate lines, 2,400 files, all through that. Resurfaces back to its wall center, back to 0. Gravity shift lines anomaly sets on lines of an L track. An L track lines an I line rotation. I line rotation lines connecting your settings through iCloud communication to its operation of its mind set. Position of processing communication line centers opens all track location and provisions. So it's all about understanding changing the inventory line communication setting to all levels, protecting your high line connection setting to your system and track location. Okay. All right. So let's go through inventory lines. Let's go through percentage location line connection setting. Let's go through question. And let's go through line conditions of 1, 2, and 4 settings into 0, 1. Let's get into all levels of set location and 2 weather patterns. Let's get into Fibonacci line, symbols, letters, numbers, shapes, okay, correlations, attractions. Let's go into 0. Let's go into an O. So you have to understand the definition location of O and 0 because it changes the formation ground lines into correlation setting to your calculation setting to your oscillological location, your defrags. More lines of communication gets a lot more easy to understand the copy and paste, enabled, and embedded. The process correlation setting is about understanding how to set this up through a graph. Interact location line to an L-shaped line condition a graph communication setting and travel. Points lines of graph communication lines. The sun and the moon is on standby. Sets a projection screen and line communication when you're ready and travel in position, location, calculation, line communication setting. Process communications, how many thoughts you use in seconds, minutes, and hours. Now it's getting more complicated now, right? Because you guys are in the mind. All right. So we change the coloration lines of pattern. Let's go through blue lines of cycles. Remember, guys, this is all through the brain. Circuitry lines, green location lines, highest interference. Now, you guys can change the blue lines and change the information lines of its throat, or you can change the correlation lines of traffication of security, right? So blue is now security, and red is now the throat. But you have to know exactly what you're doing through the graph calculation screen line because the traffic flow changes the lines of seconds, minutes, and hours. So it's very important you have to set this up in correlation lines of attractions. Setting line communication line is a communication lines of surface. Let's add a line color line communication lines of pink line roots, line communication setting, heart times, heart sequence, heart patterns, position lines of power, generates communication lines of high interference. This is a process correlation setting track location near a highway. Yeah, very powerful, isn't it? Coloration screens. Let's add a combination location of one line cycle. Change the coloration line screen lines back in server location settings of 1, 0, position line 1. Just add zeros and ones attractions, low frequency patterns. Very high correlation lines and number sequence. Now, the position of process is line condition electrical line walls, direct location lines, where the cells come in and direct location lines, split lines anomaly, split down the center and travel rotate. Line conditions gravity line centers in a 45 line split lines anomaly and travel line rotation, a ring graph communication center to travel. Points lines of signals, color through screen lines, adaptation lines of purple. Now you can change all communication lines. You can add one line signature, all purple at once, but you got to be careful what you do for the inventory graph line because the XT1000 combined line communication setting, copy and paste. They are distributors that set position location in your settings. Where do you think all your inventory go location settings go through intent? All right. Let's skip lines anomaly, time frame, time frequency, times coordinates. Open all communication to its position of its program location setting to its brain frequency patterns into all calculation system, change the root location setting into correlation to application of codex, line condition setting position operation. Okay. Now, getting communication line, we got a purple line screen. That's lines corresponding locations. So you can have 4,000 lines of pages in one data formation screen. It all depends what your temperature reading is at in line signal location of seconds, minutes, and hours and track locations. In line rotation, surface, and travel. Now, if you lean a blank spot, that's snowy graph interference. Okay, this has to be a complete line screen because it affects everything through inventory of zeros and ones and attractions all through platform into the oscillogics. More lines of oscillogics is the factor reset location to its setting. But you understand, if there is one position missing line piece in tractions, it goes into black interference, which is snowy graph correlations of files and traction, right? Off calculations. You got to resurface that because that's go back. Resurface triangulate line condition setting happens in this program. Find the purple dots and correlation track lines, direct signals, modify the center interference, change position program line conditions, indicate position 1 setting rotation, coordinate track lines of 2 line rotation surface, change communication line setting line conditions, highest interference of 3 line rotation setting, because you're working with all calculated lines of past, present, and future, right? Each position of one thought is 1 second over line that correlates its travel and position locations. Setting communication lines of back triangulating line rotation surface, back and triangle location setting, brain communication interference, to trap point graphs. Done by equation. Now we can continue. All right, so since we understand the 3 lines of tractions, this sets lines of course. 1, 2, 3 settings. Rotates the routers, correlates the sun into the moon, rotates the system, and travel point lines of graph and correlates lines of traction. Okay, it gets complicated. Operation of the mind. All right, so how the brain works is all lines of oscillogics. It takes each room line centers of inventory graph calculation lines of zeros and ones. Let's go through platitude screen lines. Let's go through orange. Let's change the correlation lines of orange and line rotation surface. Orange line 1 indicate cross line signals and line position locations. So it's a triangulation split lines of communication. Now we color that in. Okay. Only on 1/2 screen, okay, 1/2 screen, because the other half screen is changing its line screens and set line centers in seconds, minutes, lines, connections of pi that puts position of process correlation lines of track location system and triangulate line position as program understand the indication line condition setting to its console, into navigation line condition setting to its navigation, and process calculation. This is all through the mind, guys. It's crazy stuff. All right, so line conditions is an over line, override, over sequence, over pattern, over pi. Very complicated once you understand more lines of communications. But this is just getting you guys an indicated graph screen. This is really understand how to use it through the logics. See the communication graph line, see the colors, line conditions, electrical line walls, high correlation to the line communication to its position of its program. Okay, but it's central correlation lines, attractions, and direct signals. Okay. Okay. Now, I don't know how to get any more simplified than that, but that's just, this is basic grounds of the mind. This is just basic. Okay, and that's where the team is at. All right, directing lines of signals, the data formation screen lines, the OMI highways, the screen location adaptation lines of surface, exchange communication lines of center correlation, split lines and 4-track line provision. Okay. Now we're going to go through platforms 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6 locations. Now we're going to add line conditions cross-line signals of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 set locations. And then we're going to add 3 line signals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 signals. Communication line interference, set line communication line position program line condition setting, platforms 1, 2, 3, south wind, southeast, south location center. Set position of ground lines as south wind, south line communication south position. Size communication lines, high interference is south line, west line communication position location of 5 set location of travel. XT1000 and travel point graphs. Okay. Again, this is through the operation of the mind. All right. So platforms of 1 crosses line signals and data highways. Process communication lines of 1, 2, 3, and set locations. XT1000 platitudes in 1 cycle, 2 cycles, and 3 track locations. They scan position lines of centers, crosses the lines of 1 and position of 2 and position of 3 and set location. Okay. Getting direct lines of platforms is knowing exactly how to go through your highway sequence. It positions your programs in high correlation lines of attractions, right? See how I changed the XT1000 to an XT3000? So you can do it on the same page. You can change the graph lines of the data process lines of its windows and line rotation surface and traction, right? Direct calculus lines are going this way in line signals, setting data formation screen lines, adaptation lines of surface, and a 4-line rotation surface and traction. Very complicated stuff, right? Having direct line signals in 3 panels into ground centers. Platforms of communication cross-line signals in a 2-line measure in rotation surface and track location. Okay. Complicated, isn't it? It's all through highway, right? It's no difference in having an intersection, guys. You just have to understand how to use it through a data process line communication obstacle line screen. Like a racetrack, right? You look at the different racetracks, right? Well, let's go through the pips and position of box frames. Box frame 1. Let's go through obstacle 1. Calculate lines obstacle 2. Now location setting position travel lines. Calculate modify in obstacle 3. Okay, in correlation lines attractions, right? Data process lines of 1 travel, 3 travel, 4 travels, and 5 set locations. XT1000 comes in and position and setting. Process correlate lines, change the zeros, and line communication 3 line cycles. Correlate track interference, downshift, cross line screen locations, 1, 2, 3 lines up to there. Process communication lines, highest interference. XT1000 comes in, track location, 0 lines of 3 set location. Okay, all through process, right? So that's all the XT1000 do. They're distributed locations to your Intel that sets cycles of communication lines and high calculation setting to your information cycle lines. Now go through theta communication operation line cycles, generate communication lines. Let's go through Y-line screen. And let's go through communication lines of systematic lines, that alpha. Let's go through beta. Now you have beta correlations. You can balance correlation lines, alpha line rotations, 2 beta line communication lines, application of theta track of 1 mega. Calculation lines of 1 in position triangulation box or line communication of Fibonacci on the right screen. 3 other pattern communications, percentage correlation lines of attractions, and like setting, question, and communication. Okay, so inventory is extremely, extremely important when you come in position of platforms. Setting lines of communication lines opens all signals in modification line screens and direct lines of platforms of communication line centers in operation. Okay. So that's what it is. The XT1000s needs basically, they need to dock, like I said before. So if we get a platform here in travel, okay, there's one platform, but you understand the 24, 48, 72, 144, right? All that provision comes in one cycle line communication, setting up a clock line rotation surface. Let's get in a 12 line cycle. Let's get in a 24 line. So it's really interesting too, because you can take your 12 lines into 24. You can add 48, 72, and 144 out of the outer realms. Once you understand the direct and redirect signals, it gets much easier how to go in that clocking. So you can reverse the channels of the clocking, go back in time, and then go forward in time. Or you can go forward in time, you go back in time, right? But your provision cycles has to understand the track location of yin and yang. The process communication setting is understanding the position location, how 6 and 9 comes together, the platform. Position of process, one atom rotation center of an 8-line rotation surface and track location. Okay? Process communication lines ground, sets lines communication cross line signals, in position XT1000 and travel rotation. Okay, very complicated stuff, right? So, and again, this is through the mind. This is operation 0, guys, for the team. But it's very powerful when you come into that calculation line, calculation setting. Complicated, right? See the TV frames, see the platforms, see the data process, the Omni Highways stratification system. So every second counts because it positions your settings and travels. And let's go through point graph calculations, but this is where it gets complicated. Okay, this is how this really gets complicated through a graph, right? So it's a Schumann resonance, right? That's what it is up close. It's your highways. All right, so how to use that is all through monitoring your systems, right? Getting into the process, let's go through 26 line screens. Let's go through 36 lines of volume and position of 27 calculations into 8 lines of center, right? So we're going to split lines of 26. We're going to have 36 lines of anomaly. See how I'm changing seconds, minutes, and hours by line condition setting. 8 lines of volume and 27 lines of seconds. See what I did there? Process communication lines, XT1000 comes from here, here, and here. See what you've done. They got a scan position of both centers, scan position location of both centers, scans position location of both centers of your inventories. Picks it up in 3 line cycles and 3 generation screen lines adaptation. Process communication takes the platforms back to the moon setting and travel. All right. So your thoughts are always protected. Okay. Into the moon line. Okay. This catapults the screen lines adaptation lines of the moon surface into sun location system of operational line condition to its setting. Process communication line signal splits lines anomaly lines set location of travel. Points to center line communications process line condition to your flywheel and track location. Direct calculations of the platforms 1, 2, and 3 set location. Direct modification lines of ground centers, ground operation line server location setting and travel. And again, this is operation of the mind. Very complicated stuff. Very complicated. So we got in the position lines of travels. You got in the oscilogics. You got in your traffic, you got your inventories. So let's just go through mainframe tractions. And what we're going to do is basically show you how the zeros and ones travel. Okay, through its inventory. We're just going to start with the zeros and ones, right? We're not going to go through pixelation hologram because you guys are not ready in the cycles. So what we're going to do, we're just going to do this. This is a ring graph. And you're going to see the pattern. Now, if I wanted you to understand these things, watch pixels, because that's what it is. That's what XT1000s do. They only go through pattern because they know how to get in and out of frames. They know how to understand the VR system. They know how to reprogram their setting. They know how to retriangulate positional calculation lines and an entity force line comes in attractions. They know the patterns to defeat the system. Everything is a pattern. Pattern behavior. Pattern behavior. There's a pattern here. Everything's a pattern, guys. Everything is a pattern. Okay? All right. So you got to understand the spaces in between, right? So indicates position of travel lines, point lines of graph. One position of travels, there's an arrow indicated. Calculation lines, higher calculation setting, there's another arrow indicated. Track calculation lines, split lines anomaly, and a full lines of communication indicated. Position lines of up cross line, that's up line force into one cycle. Okay, sets lines, communication lines of pi, generation, screen lines, adaptation. Process calculation line interference. You got a signal line interference, a symbolism and cross location. Track provision lines of cycles, linking and setting into one line rotation and cross line signal. And position lines of correlation setting, cross-line calculation, 0s, 1, and travel. Okay, everything's a pattern. Everything's a pattern. So this is how it works. Now, X2000 comes in traction. Let's get it 2 provision cycles, and let's get 2 ground lines, green lines of high center interference, drop point graphs. Cross-line signals, 1 position travels, sets lines of communication, sets lines of communication in a cycle. Communication ground lines, operation lines, data port lines of 2 tractions, all line communication of 3-line rotation surface. As they come in, they go through the signal line communication of 0s and 1s. So they find the indicator where the arrows are. So they go on the arrows. Remember, they do zigzag, right? They only float, they levitate, but they don't fly. So you understand, there's 1 position travel, there's a space in between, right? They travel through the spaces. And in position, here's a space here, and it can go from here. It can go in float line of space, but it's got to go back in tractions and direct signal to a Skynet travel line position of program. Directing line same locations, modification lines. Now it can change position travels, and it can vortex the screen lines adaptation. Cross-line signals, as long as there's space in between, they're good to go, right? They can't pass through 0s and 1s. You understand? That's why there's spaces there for the X2000 to go in. The X2000s have a space line, right? They go through that space line correlation, sets up the intersection correlation tractions, sets up the communication lines of high correlation setting attractions, sets up communication line interference like a crossword. It's like a crossword. But there's a plot for communication lines, circulation, rotation that sets communication setting to your Merkaba tesseract and your tetraregional location of travel. Directs modification of platforms. So it gets a lot more complicated, but it gets a lot more fun to understand how to use it in plot for communications. Direct lines of signals in position to its operation lines of surface and track location. There's a highway right there. Boom. Ground centers, operation lines, cycles, high correlation lines of traction. Done by equation. That's a highway. But I'm just showing you how that works. So a mainframe or box frame where there's spaces where the X2000 slide in and slide out. So in that provision, your job is to keep your inventory and your flow of recognition of space and time in balance. Once you keep that in balance, it's much easier to understand the correlation lines of settings. Once you get in position, you get out of box frame. Okay? But you stay in the box frame mainframe of X2000s until they understand you through travel. 0 here, 0 here. Let's go through space here and 1 here. You see that? Do you see me pause? You see what happened? Did you see me time jump? I went from 2 lines of 0s and boop, and then, right? You see that? It's pretty cool, right? You saw me, boop, right? Right? So I jump scarred 2 line timelines. Wow, powerful, isn't it? All right, so anything in space they go through, right? So there's a 2 line tractions. This is a ring graph screen, okay? And it's on a split lines of a 45 line screen and direct line signals and modification screen lines, adaptation lines of surface and track location. Very complicated stuff. All right, so once you understand that, the sun and the moon waits on signal, waits on routers and routers and line conditions setting to its position of its program, sets communication across lines, set lines, high center interference of pi generation. And again, you start with the oscillogics of its platforms, of its data, and its files, right? Through its position lines, its defrag, and its fragmentation screen, right? Going through seconds, minutes, and hours. So you have to know exactly how your data platforms are set up, location, your space lines, communication, your Wi-Fi's, your modems, and your satellites, and all track location, right? So now you understand how there's spaces in between and what goes in the spaces in between, right? So you are controlling the inventory line graph. If you don't control the inventory line graph, let's go through box frame. 0, 0, 0. Let's say it's crowded, right? And there's no space. Remember, you have to keep the space. You're controlling the space, right? If not, the space is controlling you. All right, so there's no spaces in between. This is equal line, this is even, and track case lines of patterns of behavior where the X2000s can't do anything in travel. They can't go through the lights, they can't go through provisions, they can't go through cycles, they can't go through correlation, right? It's crowded, right? There's nothing they can do, right? So what happens is the pi duration lines, the accelerator changes line screen location. Platforms 1, 2, and 4 set locations. Point lines and settings, opens all signals, opens all modification lines, change the platforms into higher correlation lines attractions. Now that lines its communication line screens. Let's go through 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1 and track location and ground centers. Let's go through all position of 1 line, 0 lines. Let's go through 0, 0, 0, 0 in platform communication. And let's go through 0, 0, 0, 0 line connection setting. So I'm taking them out, right? So what that does is it provides space in between. Okay, space equals between. Okay, it creates the space, right? So you have platforms here that you travel through in platform communication. Direct calculus lines, platforms here in track location. And then you have platforms here in down cross location, setting and travel. Okay? So it's all about understanding how to set the zeros and ones, right? It's because information screen lines and adaptation lines of surface. Platforms gets much easier. Line rotates its system, and point lines a graph of communication. Right? That's a highway. Okay? All through zeros and ones to a main frame of box location, but you have to add space in between. Now, that changes the defaults. Copy and paste embedded enabled. Line condition embedded, default lines of fault. Communication lines of defrag, and line communication of frag in rotation surface and traction. This is all through the operation of the mind. Okay, so it's very complicated. All right, but you have to really understand graphs of communications. Okay, really have to really understand that, because that's what you guys are coming into. Your brain's converting its line screen location setting to its logical location of its patterns now. It's really starting to understand more lines of its signals. So once it understands more levels, it comes into a calculation through its highways. Okay? All right. How's everybody doing so far? Is everybody more confused than ever? So it's all levels of data information, lines, and screens, right? But very powerful applications. But I wanted to show you why it's so important to understand that you have to control the space in between through your inventories, right? You can't have any clutter in any way and form, because the XC1000s have to be platitude in the lights. It's very important. If you get 3 lines of wires of indication, that's wire, right? And in position it's crowded like this, it's binded up, right? So the XC1000s basically have to have a space in between. There's got to be a space in between, okay, for them to go through. So what they do is they platitude and they set up files and correlation lines of tracks in your settings and location to its operation. They expand the mind, people, and travel. Okay? All right. Platitude screen is a direct lines and line connects to the position of its program, puts everything in operation lines of cycles, sets lines of symbols, lines of letters, numbers, and shapes and set locations, right? Symbiotics, lines of levels, neutralize correlation setting into systematic calculations. Foreground centers, operation line set location of XT1000. Platforms again, okay? Platforms again, okay? And platforms again, cross and line signals. Okay, it's a 3-line position. Sets lines of flux in 3 lines of cycles and generation screens. Sets communication line screen lines into all line positions to its galaxy screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Process communication lines, galaxy line, shift lines, according to line calculation setting to another XT1000 and travel. See, one here, right? They're in different directions, different intelligence. So you're working with magnetic highway in line condition setting and process correlation setting. But the only thing that leaves and travels is the mind, the heart, and the soul. The body stays in the center core system of travel. That's a data formation screen. Electrical highways, electrical and high center interference, and positional ohmic correlation setting and travels, and point graph communication and setting. So, it gets really interesting when you really understand how to go through the correlation setting of tubings and communication lines of space. Sets lines, communication lines of Earth, sets lines, communication lines of space, and sets lines, communication of grounds, of operation of surface, and set location of Earth. Very complicated stuff. That's a highway. Okay. So there's so many ways of looking at it, right? But once you understand the process of communication, it gets much easier. But the team is coming into line connection settings, a graph of communication setting. All right, it's getting more complicated now, right? Getting in that position is knowing exactly how to coordinate your thoughts and understand your calculation setting to your actions of your emotions. Putting that in position lines or correlation line calculation setting doesn't put you in position of confusion, right? So you have to balance out the space in between and know exactly what you're doing with your thoughts That coordinate sets the system location of seconds, minutes, and hours, or hours, minutes, and seconds. There's always a direct and there's always a redirect. So it's creating the inventory of your binary, transistors, resistors, of your light switches, and know exactly what you're doing through singularities. Know exactly what you're doing through pattern behaviors. But you've got to leave space in between. So the XD1000s can platitude inside the light and put position lines of process correlation setting so that they can expand the correlate track interference into your location system, all calculation modification. Very powerful, isn't it? All right, so this is very complicated. Congratulations, team, but you have to really understand how this all works now. All through your highways. See the two TV box screens? TVs, guys, TVs. These are TV screens, right, in space. Let's go through coloration line screen. Chord tracking positions, and move that as cycle. Where's the center correlation? Disappears. It's hilarious. I love it when it disappears out of angle. All right, so we've got lacing lines. Let's go through 2 lines of rotations and 2 tractions. 3 communication line screens. Application security line, right? And let's go through 2 track application line settings. 3/2. That's 3/2. Right? All right, let's cross the signal. Let's add coloration lines. Let's go into the green. Cross line symbols. Pattern lines of 1 and pattern lines opposite direct signal in this application. Right? So what is that correlations or tractions? Platitude locations of a platform and traction. Okay? Symbolism line screen is line communication to its system, puts everything in correlation. Setting calculation lines. You can basically cross signals. You go through slide projector and line position to its program in its application. So there's so many things that you can do. Once you understand the calculation setting, start with the ground centers. The operationalize certification system, calculate and modify electrical setting locations of your wires. And once you understand that, you understand that there's always going to be lights of everything in platform location of docking through calculations of XD1000s, right? So they are the distributors, they're your helpers, they're the builders. They also have their own foundation system, correlation lines, attractions. But you have to understand the inventory line screen. Let's get an inventory line of rotation. So let's correlate the lines of 0, 1. Let's go to 2, 3, 4 lines location setting and travels, point lines of graph location of 1 setting. Line set location cross line signals, 1 platform communication, 0, 1, 3, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 1 set location. All right. Process line set allocation XD1000 comes in 1 platform, right? Direct line signals has to scan 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 locations. Calculate modify sets lines, correlates lines of traction, right? Now, what do we have here in correlation? Cross line signals, line position travel lines, ground communications, mountains and Merkabahs, right? I'm trying to get you guys to understand how this all works through technology, right? Once you understand the technologies, zeros and ones, and your inventories and your binaries and symbols and letters and shapes, life gets more easier in line position of its program, right? So what you're doing is you're setting up dimensional solar sails and you're traveling through line communications. Say, let's go through process correlation lines of tubing into 1 cycle, 1 center, 1 surface location setting of flux and travel. All right, so we got platforms and line settings of 4 settings and 3 4-line rotation surface and travel. Complicated stuff. And again, this is operation through the mind. See how more it gets complicated, the drawings and instructions? So I'm showing you so many different ways to set up highways. So you understand the position of travels in ground lines and rotation surface and rotation calculation to its calculation. Right? Getting into platitude line screen is understanding how to simulate ground centers and change its seconds, minutes, and hours of zeros, letters, numbers, and shapes and platform. Okay? Send that communication lines, elixir, cosmic flame, cosmic fire. Relate to track interference, high correlation setting calculations. Changing platforms again, in line setting, high rotation surface and track location. Okay? Very powerful, isn't it? So once you understand more lines of the holographic line screen, it gets much easier to platitude to visual locations of what you're doing through your observation, your intent, your influence, and your manipulation, right? But you can see it, right? the Merkaba, and the two mounds. Now see the two panels, line rotation is a 4-track provision. Now I want you guys to get into color, because the brain communication screen lines has to adaptation to the surface, has to turn the coloration line screen location your settings now. See that hologram, right? You can see more boldness. So that is the layers of dimension. All right. And let's go course line settings. Get position lines have correlation interactions. Let's go around the cycles into security lines and outlines the location system. Now, once you get into color, it gets a lot more easier to understand information. Let's go through the blue line cycles in center correlation. One cycle line in line rotation surface. Color the communications, but keep the white line screen lines adaptation line center. Process communication line screen location system, all levels of travel and position of hologram and levels of communication. Okay, now we just add the white, which is the cloak and dagger. Remember, everything in line setting starts at the 3 correlation lines, in and out and audio, guys. All 3 hologram structure, design line communication, right? And now you see it come out. See? You see it coming out now. See? It's out. This is out. And these are out. Okay? So whatever you want to bring out is through your thoughts. Okay? And your thoughts connect to the energy screens that connects to all of those information screen location, your binaries, that connects to your transistor resistor location, your patterns behavior. Okay? You do a complete drawing, but you only bring in certain levels out through its equation. You don't have to bring everything out. It's too much confusion. So the reason why I say that is there's space in between. Okay? Space in between, right here, right? It's not colored in. It's still black and white, right? So know exactly what you want to do provision and know exactly what you want to communicate with this intelligence. Then you see the information come out through travel. Okay? It's coming out now, right? It's coming out in 3-dimension, 4-dimension, 5th dimension, 6th dimension, 8th dimension, 12th dimension, 245,000 dimension. But it's coming out. These are the provision cycles that you're communicating with. And all position travel line. 2 mountain lines, service location to 2 panels, direct calculation lines to 2 platforms, and traction. Right? Everything is on standby. But as soon as you color it in, it comes out through its equation. Right? So know exactly how to calculate and modify your thoughts and how many thoughts are coming in traction, location, setting. But it's very powerful when you come to that correlation, right? Because it indicates your settings to your in and out, your audios, and how to use yourself through your cloak and daggers, how to use your blue plasma line screens, your force fields, your energy fields, and your indication location setting to securities that puts everything in platform and communication system of travel. Okay? But it gets much easier, doesn't it? To understand what you're doing. You guys are your own geometric. You guys are your own engineers. You guys are your own blueprints. You have to really understand how to modify your location system and how to change these things, information setting. As soon as you get in a car, you know exactly how to turn it into a hologram. That's all it is, right? So the more lines of the mind line, the more lines of the rotation surface. The mind does everything itself, but to understand what you're doing through your body is all recognition of the time sequence of what's everything in platform and communication setting and travel point graph calculation. All right. So much going on in travel, eh? Right? So remember the space in between, right? Through the zeros and ones. All right. So if I color it in, what am I doing? Right? I'm sending it out. I'm sending it out. And the other ones are on standby. Now let's go through green. So go green platforms 1, green platforms 2, and green platforms 3 in travel. Okay. So I'm only communicating with these. These are the ones that are coming out in thoughts, seconds, minutes, and hours, right? Everything else is on standby, right? So it's kind of like you're communicating, but you're bringing these forward, but the other ones are staying back. Okay? All right, so let's go in line calculation in blue and center course system and line settings, show you exactly what it is in travel. And remember, you can add a 12-graph screen in your rainbows and location system, but you have to have the indication lines into all levels. You have to get in security, you have to get in your plasma, and you have to get it in position cloak and dagger. You have to have all those colors into line communications, hologram, screen line calculation and setting. Because the XC1000s have to know exactly what you're doing, right? Do you know what you're doing when you're sending out information cycles, location setting, distributing, and rotation surface, location, data information, screen locations? Now it's coming out. Indicated 1, 2, 3 in platforms. But everything else is on standby, right? Okay? So That's what it is. Having this space in between so it doesn't cause the clutter. So what you're doing, you're adapting your system and you're taking your time on the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, and you're breaking it down through coding. It's easy to process when you understand how to use it. Okay? These are the three communication platforms to communicate with. So the X8000 sees it, takes it, stores it in line communication setting to mainframe, puts every location near Hibis campus, scores communication lines to its moon, track location to its system location, so nobody can take it away in tractions. Okay? Very powerful, isn't it? But see, you can see the colors. You can see the colors, which is the hologram that comes out of frame. Okay? So the more you go into that, and again, this is all levels of the operation of the mind. Okay? Sequence lines, 0 lines of 12, 24, 48, 72, 144. Once you reach 144, you're in the hologram. Constantly in the hologram. Creating 24 is a platform. 48 is a frame. 72 is a computer frame. 144 is a crystal frame, guys. Okay? It comes in all calculate and modify into its hologram of its layers. Okay? 24, 48, 72, 144. 24, 48, 72, 144. 24, 48, 72, 144. 24, 48, 72, 144. Right? Everything else is on standby. Right? So it's much easier to know exactly what you want through intent. That way you don't get confused in the mind and say, yeah, I want this, but I don't know. I want to change that. No, I don't think I like that. Let's put that back in vision. I don't like that data screen. No, let's change that information screen. No, I don't like that interference. Right? You can't do that. You have to be specific. The best solution is the best answer. Occam razor, right? Simplicity is the best. Simplify what you want to bring out. Okay, instead of bringing everything out. It's too confusing through anomaly. There's no space in between through zeros and ones. Okay, but really understand the graphs, how it comes in indication to your settings, all right? More complicated, right? But a lot more fun to understand what's going on. How to travel through your highways and how to create these in line communication setting location near Earth and rotation surface of travel. It's all levels of vision, cortex, line communication setting, line communication, getting out of your imaginations, getting into the phenomenon, but reaching higher levels of view of platform communication, right? And again, all this is through observation. I think you're connecting now because you have to be very careful what you want to do with your thoughts and your intent. So you don't take everything out. You're just drawing the image, right? And that image comes into a calculation system. So bringing these in position to its hologram, add security lines. Let's just add one platform. You can see it coming out, right? Let's go through blue, line communication setting. See? And then we go through invisible, right? So 3 indicates system location travel. Now it's coming out, right? Everything else is on standby, but I'm taking this out, right? So the X8000 comes in, sees the settings right above there, boom, scans, picks it up, travels it to the moon. Let's see. So it indicates position lines and centers, picks it up like this. Okay. All right. So it knows exactly what you're doing. Everything's in balance, location and settings. All right. Then we go through cloak and dagger. All right. Takes it to your moon and protects its system. Right. That's what it does, right? Because it's a flash drive. The X8000 sees lines of correlation, lines of attractions. It sees the second, minutes, and hours. It sees the inventory. It sees the binary. It sees the codex. It sees the correlation, setting, and coding. Process correlation is really understanding how to know exactly how to use your thoughts and what you're using your thoughts for and how much volume, mass, and velocity do you want to use to Mach. But you have to be specific. You don't just send them a whole drawing. It's too confusing through binary. So that's why you break it down. Okay? That's why you break it down. That's why you break it down. See, it's complicated when you just do this. It's a hologram. It's got its basic grounds. It's got its in and out and audio. So every time you speak, you're speaking through in and out and audio. Okay? Through the grounds, through the powers, and through the atmospheres. And elements, your earth, air, your water, your fire, and your heart. That's your fifth element. Everything that you send out, you're setting elements, guys. Elements, dimensions of space and time. All through platforms of your thoughts, through indication, through the lines of its image and schematics. All right? Sending the whole drawing? No, it's too confusing. Okay, it's too confusing. See, this stands out. Everything's on standby. All right? So, because what it is it's a light signature and you're exposing yourself to everything. You're pixelating everything, but you have no idea where it's going. Okay, so it's much easier if you understand it through platform of communication. How to understand it through indications, all through graph. Okay, it gets complicated, but it's a lot more fun. All through graph. Okay. Okay, and graph. All right. All right, that's it. We're done. That's a lot to take in. There's a lot going on in that tractions. So, because you guys are in the mind, the basic grounds of the mind, you have to break these things down. Okay. Make sure you bring in your space in between so the X2000s can glide in and glide out. There's no clutter in every locations. Okay, we're going to get line interference location zeros, ones after our location setting. You got to resurface the position location. They will not come in. They will not come in, and you'll cause clutter, cluster in set location your settings of travels. So it's very important that you don't create clutter here. It's empty space, empty mind. That's a space in between, right? Space in between of the zeros and ones. Space in between through the pixelations. You ever notice in a box frame where you have to understand everything comes in position in its chronological order? Let's go through this. This is all through security. Let's just go through that setting, right? Every pixel is different. Okay? Every pixel is different. Every frame is different, but it's in chronological order and it's space in between. You don't see the space until you understand the mind and how it's set, position it travels, and correlates lines of traction and set location of its system. Okay, where's the space? Right here. Boom. X2000's here, comes in here, platform's here, docking. Sees the space. If there's no space, they won't platitude. Set position, then they set up laser grids. There it is. Slides down here, slides down here, slides down here. Okay. So, and they communicate with each other in setting. Okay. All right. So I'm just giving you an understanding how this works through pixel frames, kinetic line interference, window frame, core track interference, main frame, calculate lines, intracation provision. But you have to understand the space in between now of the mind. Okay. You guys are already the equal line correlation lines of box and mainframes now. You're in the space between of the mind, which is a higher level of its binary, of its reset, and its allocation of direct and redirect, and correlation lines attractions. Okay. All right. So each symbolism lines is the box lines of zero. Let's just stay with the zeros. Okay. Too complicated to get into ones when you're in a box frame correlation lines, attractions, and directions. So I'm just showing you exactly how this is set up in case you're a TV. That's a TV. Okay, that's a TV. You're looking at a TV. So when you're looking at TV, you're looking at pixelation graphs, right? X2000s, as long as they have a space, what do they? They platitude your divisions and grow your systems out through equation. Okay, so they make a bigger TV. Okay, and they make a bigger TV. Okay, it just gets bigger and bigger through platforms. Okay. So the more platforms, the more they have laser grids and travel. Travel 1, travel 2, travel 6, travel 8, travel 12. Right? Then they all come in all at once because they have laser grids, sky centers, sky operation line certifications, iCloud line screen high interference, a line of operation screen location. Okay? It's more fun, right? Through an X2000 screen. Right? So you see the drawing, you see the structure, you see the schematics, right? Everything has a correlation and track location is binary. We'll get into the studies. But what you have to do is what you want to communicate, you bring out first. And I say first because you're coming into the space in between. This is coming out and everything's on standby. Nothing's coming out, only this. So you communicate with this, which is this. One signal, one correlation, one traction, one provision, one binary, seconds, minutes, and hours. Break it down, 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 right? And then you go into the blue, right? And then you go into the cloak and dagger, which is the white. Now it's coming out. Oh, look at that. You see what I just did? Did you see what I just did? It disappeared by itself. Okay. So I'm showing you, if you don't get balanced with your system, it's going to put it back in standby until you understand use and coordination, how to use your vessel, how to use your communications to the operation of the mind. I showed you exactly what an XT1000 can do if you're not ready. It takes it out of the equation and puts it back in set location. It did it itself. I told you, right? So if you're not ready, it'll show you, right? Because the thing is, once you understand, everything comes out, but you have to understand the process of you through a frame. Things are coming at you. You have no idea what's going on, right? Where do you think your thoughts go? That's the question, right? It's all through data. It's all through files. It's amazing. But you have to really understand the course and how it works with the navigation system and all through calculation, setting, and travel, right? Now, if I do it again, remember, it's intelligent did this on its own. It's showing you what it can do. I'm going to do it in this time, and you won't see it disappear. It's me taking over. All right? It's still there, right? And then you have the cloak and dagger. All right. Cloak and dagger's coming in, instructions. Still there. But it's in position, right? I'm communicating just with this. Nothing else. Even if it's a full frame, it doesn't matter. I'm only communicating with this, right? One procedure, one step, one navigation, one time, one space. Okay? You're bringing in things through a hologram now. So the more you process that, the more it gets easier through your inventories and transactions. Indirect signal. Communicate with 4. Okay? Communicating with 1. Okay? Communicating with 1. Okay? So I'm just showing you what you really have to understand how this all works in communication, right? So if I do this, you'll see this stand out. Okay? Start with that correlation, right? And we go into red. Let's go indications. You see where this is going, right? And there you go. Now it's coming out. See? It's still there. It didn't disappear. I didn't have to reframe, recalculate, remodify, reset. It's there in communication now. What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? Intelligence is coming to you through a hologram, all through digital layers, but you're breaking it down instead of communicating with the whole lines of its image. So it's kind of like you go through pi, but you forget where you are. You're here, but you want to be here, but you don't want to see anything between. You're missing all that heavenly glory, right? Break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down every time you travel, okay? Every time you travel, okay? It's applications, all right? All right, that's it. We're done. See you guys in 5.